guys, you're listening to Geek World with Anime and Dave. Today we are talking about Dune.
Oh man, I'm so excited. I've waited like years for this movie. Ever since I found out it was greenlit and that Denis Villeneuve was going to make it and the casting. And I mean, this is my favorite book.
Yes.
Like the first Dune specifically is my favorite book of all time. I have seen every version of this. I've seen the David Lynch version. I saw the sci-fi like mini-series version from back in the like very early 2000s. And now it's finally here. It has finally arrived. Like the great Shah-Hulud coming from the desert. You know, we walked without rhythm, and here we are.
Here we are.
With Dune.
With Dune. Yeah. But now, it's been a little while since the last time you read the book, right?
Yeah, it's been about a year,
yeah.
I would say, yeah. But, you know, honestly, it was at least the second time, if not third time I read it. So I'm pretty familiar with the book.
I mean, you say that, but let's not forget the time that we talked about the trailer and the first images that came out for it.
Yeah.
And we had some comments.
Yeah, but they were like so minor. It wasn't like I was like, oh, look at like, you know, it wasn't like I was like, oh, yeah, it's like General Atreides, not Duke. It was like dumb stuff. I think it was about Liet Kynes, who's a character I couldn't really remember all that well from the book anyway.
Yeah.
So it's okay, you know, to take away my credibility so soon,
you know,
okay?
I'm just saying, no.
I'm very sad.
No, it was about, it's been a while since you read it. Every little detail might not be right there for you to pick out.
That's okay.
Because we literally just watched the movie.
Yeah, we did, yeah. So, it's 2.5 hours, and it is, I just want to come out real quick and say, like, overall, like, first impressions is, I really loved it. I really, really loved it. I thought that, like, so many things hit right.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, we're going to, like, discuss whether or not, like, you know, certain things might be difficult for people who aren't familiar with the universe, but after seeing so many different versions of this done, you know, with the spectacular sort of disaster, which was Lynch's version, and the sort of underwhelmingness of the sci-fi version, this is the first time I've seen it, especially visually, correlate into something that I think like really works. But also on top of that, like story-wise, I think they finally got it really as close as I've seen to like it making kind of sense on the big screen. You know, they took their time. A lot of the dialogue and a lot of stuff was lifted right from the book, and I think honestly they may have improved some stuff too from what I remember in the book, which is no easy task considering the book is such an iconic masterwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's get into it. I mean, I think first and foremost, I knew I would be excited. You know, Timothée Chalamet is one of those young guys that came out of nowhere and like everyone's excited about. Oscar Isaac is great. Rebecca Ferguson is great. But I think the guy I least expected to steal the show, and he did, was Jason Momoa. I just have to start off by saying, like, I wasn't expecting this because you see the trailers and it's like, oh yeah, Jason Momoa is playing Jason Momoa as Jason Momoa in this. And he just looks like it's the same performance as Aquaman and everything else, but I'm like, with him in this movie, I love Dune, I love the universe of Dune, but it is it's very dry.
Yes.
It's a very dry, very, like, meticulously made story, and it's about politics, it's about religion, it's about war, it's about commerce, it's about geology, it's about like big heady things, right? And like the main character is far away from like a Luke Skywalker as you can get. This is a kid who is, you know, the son of a duke. His mom is basically like a witch ninja. He's been trained to not only also be a witch ninja, but also a military man. Also, he's been trained to be a human computer, which they don't get into in this, which I thought was interesting, but I get it. Like, there's already enough for you to swallow. Anyway, but long story short, everyone's really dry, and Momoa shows up, and he's having so much fun.
Yeah.
And he's, like, the coolest dude, which is what you want your Duncan Idaho to be like, because Duncan Idaho is a really important character in the series, and you're just like, this is great.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you, Jason. Thank you for showing up. And frankly, like, the fact they cast him, I was always so surprised by, because he doesn't seem like the guy you cast in Doom, which they kind of do with Batista, too. too. And once I got in there, it was amazing. Sorry, I was not expecting this to start off as a love fest for Jason Momoa.
You know,
it's just
it can't not be.
Well,
we've always had a bit of a love fest for Jason Momoa.
Well, it was the X factor I never expected I needed. You know what I mean? Like when everyone else, I was like, oh, I think they'll do good. And I was like, Jason Momoa, and I saw him this movie. I was like, okay, this. Denis Villeneuve knew that like they needed some excitement, you know.
Yeah, well, not just excitement, but also you know you need a tiny break from how serious everything is being taken. So you know
everything has got such a mythic quality about it, right?
And you know Duncan Idaho, he's played by Jason Momoa. It's still a serious role, but he's able to, like you said, he's able to have fun with it. He's able to sort of he has to sort of be a little bit more free with what he because of how his role.
Well, he's that classic cool guy character that is who's not the main character, but like he's the Lancelot, he's the Han Solo. Mm-hmm. If you ever watched that old movie Willow from back in the day, he's the Mad Mardigan. You know, he's that guy who's like a shining star, but is not the guy you're following.
Yeah.
And so I thought he was super dope, but like.
He's also the only character in the beginning of this story that sort of has the potential to play with and mock your main character a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the only one that can do that with Paul.
Well, especially, because, everyone spends a lot of time talking about how important Paul is. And he is really important, obviously. But, like, yeah, you're right. To have a character that's like, hey, kid, it's chill, it's okay, was really helpful. I mean, it's so hard for me to, like, even get started because there's so many things I want to talk about. First off, I think, like, the design of everything was spectacular.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I think those ships with the giant maw, like the giant mouse that other smaller ships are coming in and out of, like that also very much resembled sort of Shah-Halud, like the worm, like in its big like face, even though that was not a decision I'm sure had part of the world, but like for a viewer it kind of like worked. I thought that was really interesting. I think the way that all the ships looked and sounded, the fact that most of them like were silent, and not even just in space where obviously it's a vacuum, but also like when they were like on the land, until they got to Arrakis, and all of a sudden like they had those ornithopters that were super loud, and everything was like loud and chaotic there. Like all those choices that they made in both the design and like the sensibilities of everything, like you could tell like they were thinking about everything.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's weird about watching the movie is you're just like, there was no, like, rash decisions being made for time or for anything. They were like, we're going to think about every single thing we're doing here.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were great moments of, just sort of things that when you're first looking at it, it's like, oh, that's just beautiful. And, like, things like showing the ripples of the water on Caladan.
Yeah.
And later, the ripples on the sand of Arrakis. It's these things that this juxtaposition of these things are not as far apart as they seem, even though they're complete opposite.
100%. So many great choices. I think the only thing that struck me as being difficult, and it's so like it's really up to opinion, but like I've seen both versions now where certain pronunciations are different.
Yeah.
So like the perfect example is the villains of the series in this movie, they're called the Harkonnen. Mm-hmm. I'm used to the David Lynch version where they're called Harkonnen.
Yeah.
And so like there were little things like that but they were just decisions, and I don't know officially. So I always go with the Lynch version because apparently Frank Herbert was on set for a lot of it, and I thought the idea was that he gave them how they should sound. But at the same time, like, that's what's interesting about the written language. So anyway, Harkonnen was the biggest one for me. There were a few other ones, but I was just like, but it sounds cool either way. Harkonnen, both sound cool.
It's funny though, because I did notice that certain actors would say certain things differently, and it's kind of like in Star Wars with, is it Leia or Leia?
Yeah.
Depending on what actor.
That was the other one. It was Leto and or was it Leto? God, I'm trying to remember now. I think I say Leto. I think they said Leto.
I think this is another one where it depended on the character.
Yeah, because I remember, So there was a few things like that I, but that stuff is so irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. The movie works in a way that it was almost a little too good to be true, honestly. I think like some of the things that worked for me really well were all of like Paul sort of like basically tripping out, having like visions, you know, of all kinds of things, which are, you know, a big part of the book. Those are all really cool. A lot of them were like really like, you know, like sort of like ooh, like mystical shots of Chani, you know, played by Zendaya, but also like, you know, he had some of his really big important like scary visions that are also in the book sort of later on that are all really cool looking. I thought that was really impressive. You know, it was one of those movies too that like I feel like certain scenes were like lifted straight from the book, like dialogue wise, especially the scene where Paul and Gurney are fighting, and he talks about like the Harkonnens and how they fight, and like how like, you know, how fighting, you know, just you have to fight whenever. Like all that dialogue felt very familiar to me. Like I was like, yeah, that's almost exactly like it was in the book. And I just thought it was really cool that like it's really one of the best adaptations I've ever seen of a book, and this is why, because they stuck very closely to it. But they added stuff to contextualize it for a viewer who wasn't totally getting it, and I also think they improve. I do think they improved upon some stuff. I mean, for me, one of the major things that I thought was really interesting is I just thought they made Lady Jessica a little cooler than she had been in the book, and much cooler than she'd ever been in any of the other adaptations.
Right.
Especially the Lynch version. You know, it's really, you know, female characters, especially like in the 80s, unless a movie was about a strong female character, women tended to kind of throw them into sort of cliches a little bit. Like I remember Lady Jessica in the Lynch version, like she was cool because she was Bene Gesserit, but she was always like, once they got into the desert, was like, oh, like I can't do anything, you know, and it was always like weird. I'm like, that's Jessica. She's like a badass. Yeah. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, and this, the way that they did it, the way it's like, no, Paul just has these expertise.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it wasn't her being, I don't know what to do. It was like, lean on the one that really understands this, you know.
Well, I was just thinking Jessica was just like a badass through the entire movie.
She was, absolutely.
Is kind of my thing. And one of the big things they changed, and I don't even think this is a spoiler because like I don't even know if you'd really get it that much, but in the original book, so there was this like whole plan from the Bene Gesserit for Jessica to only have children who are girls, because they don't really get into it at all, which I thought was weird. But basically, Bene Gesserit can control the gender of their child. They have like full body control, and instead she decided to have a boy. And the reasons why she decided were actually slightly different in the book than in the movie. And I thought that was really interesting, but I thought it was kind of a good choice, because I think the reason they have her do it in the movie, I felt gave her a little more stake in the overall destiny of the story, and made her a little more of a person who made a strong decision than a person that just did something out of love.
Right.
Which I thought was really cool, and really, and I thought was like a welcome change, you know? Also, you know, because when you change stuff in an epic like this, I'm always concerned. I'm like, how dare you? But also, we watched Jodorowsky's Dune, and he wanted to do really weird stuff. So the fact that, you know, Denis and his crew, you know, just altered things slightly to, I think, work a little better, I was okay with.
Yeah, you know, it's such a tough thing, though, because we're both coming to from the perspective of someone that has, you know, both read the book, and also seen the Lynch version. You know? So we have a lot of context to work from, you know, and I do agree with you. From my perspective, it feels like this does a better job of including enough information of what you need, you know, to really get what's going on. But it's so tough to say because we have the context, because I'm able to pull on that. It makes it that it's like, okay, I do know what's going on. I wonder, for people that haven't, you know, is it too much too fast? It's at the same time, there's so much art to it that some things just feel very slow, but like I'm just like, oh, I'm entranced.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I agree with you. I mean, I think that when you compare it to like the Lynch version, it is like so much more comprehensible. Like, I think what was really smart was actually starting the movie from the point of view of Chani and the Fremen.
Yes.
And talking about how the invaders, which are not only the Harkonnen, but really the entire imperialistic thing going on with the Empire, being there and taking their land and taking their spice and them like fighting back was a really great place to start. You know, if you watch the Lynch version, it's a disaster. Like the woman who plays the princess basically like does one of those little opening monologues from the book, and she's like talking about the third Padishah emperor and this age and that age and the spice, and you're just like, what is happening? And it's like one of those things. It's kind of like when they would do it, like in the beginning of Blade Runner or any sci-fi movie, when they would have like 15 paragraphs of exposition for you to read, so when you don't get it, they can go, well, we put it on the screen. And it's like, so I think the way they contextualized this story was so much cleaner. I think the way that they contextualized the fight between the Harkonnens, I'm just going to say Harkonnens, even though I know it's different, the Harkonnens and the Atreides, the way, I really think it was really clear in as much as I've seen all the other versions not be.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you'd be lost, but like, I don't know. I think that there's some room. I mean, does Star Wars make total sense when you first see it? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I mean, like, I think you get to the point where after a while you're like, well, I don't think it was this. I think at least they were able to place like the real basic stuff in a way. I think the stuff that was confusing was frankly like the Bene Gesserit stuff.
Yes.
Like if I came into that, I'd be like, I don't get it. Why is she putting his hand in a box? I don't understand like why. Like the voice kind of comes out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like they at least they sort of set it up with that really great scene between Jessica and Paul. And him learning the voice and the Bene Gesserit ways. So they do it enough. But yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing about this, about everything in this, you know, because I think in Star Wars, for instance, like Luke is like a nobody, right? Yeah. And then like Obi-Wan shows up, he's like, you're special, I'm going to teach you the ways of the Force, and you slowly kind of get it. And so you're learning with Luke. But in Dune, they drop you in and they're like, Paul's already been in the middle of this education for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to be like, hey, Paul, like, let's talk about the weirding way.
Yeah.
You know, let's talk about, like, because he already knows this. And I do think, that's a little thing. But I also think, like, the way they, certainly by the point that they really have to use the voice in, like, sort of the action, I think you're sort of, like, aware of what's going on.
I don't even think, I think the voice is very well laid out. You know, I think, you know, it's interesting because, you know, one of the things with Jessica being as badass as she is, it's like, you know, you don't see it until later in the movie, but they even with that give a little bit of context when she's choosing the housekeeper and she's like, so you've got a weapon, it's not going to be enough. Like, you don't actually get to see her do anything at that point. But she implies it's like, I'm badass.
I know.
You know, and then later you actually get to see that put into action.
Yeah, I agree. Oh man, the shields. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I had to talk about shields. The shields maybe is my favorite thing that they did in terms of how different it was. So in the Lynch version, it was like hilarious.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have CGI really yet, and they looked like they were just in these like weird like blocky like those, you know, those crystals hippies try to sell you, and they're like this, like they looked like they were surrounded by that, and it looked terrible. And I thought they not only thought of a way to make it cool so that like when it's just on, you don't really tell it's on, but the way that they use color to showcase like the difference between something that's blocked and something that's penetrating and dangerous, with blue being safe and the red being something's penetrating and dangerous, was so brilliant. And not only did it, and I think the way that they did that, where they started off with Paul and Gurney fighting, and you showcasing that with the slow blade getting, you know, the red, but also later in the giant fights between the Atreides and the Sardaukar, when you're overhead and you see light and red and the blue and red, and you really get this like really wonderful way of completely telling what's going on. And I would say, frankly, like in my head, I feel like the popularity of video games is probably where that idea came from, because, you know, video games always have like an idea of having shields and the idea of like colors changing based on how your health is, and that's what it kind of reminded me of. And I was so impressed by that, because I was wondering how they were going to do the shields.
And it makes a lot of sense. It also, once again, it does things for the audience, especially an audience that's not familiar. You know, it just sort of gives a lot of context to things. Like you said, it's like it shows you, it's like this is blocked, this is not blocked. You know, it's like blue blocked, Red? Nope.
Exactly. And I thought that was really smart and really well done. I think, I also think, like, it wasn't boring for 2.5 hours. They really found a way to, like, keep it going. And, I will say, I really liked... I'll say first off, there's nothing I disliked, which is weird. So every time I'm like, I will say, I usually say something I don't like. I don't think there was anything I don't like. And by the way, like, this isn't me being like, oh, I'm such a Dune fanboy. Like, if they really messed up, I'd be like, honestly, I'm shocked how good it is.
Yeah.
I really came in with kind of like, not low expectations, because Denis amazing and everyone involved is amazing, but like Dune is like so hard.
Yeah.
It's like the hardest thing. And the fact that like I was like pretty good with everything they did is bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, I really was not expecting that. I was expecting to either be bored or confused or this or that, or like, I don't like this. I mean, man, the scene with, when Javier Bardem shows up as Stilgar, like, I never would have expected a performance like that in the way of, like, he really felt like a real guy.
Yes.
He felt like a desert man who's protecting his people, who's not interested in talking to these invaders, but is just controlled enough because like he doesn't want to have a all-out war with them.
Yeah.
I was like, he's phenomenal in this. Like, he was so good in that scene and so good in the rest of the movie. I was like, God, this was great. And before, the guy who played Stilgar in the Lynch version, I'm always gonna have to say, like, he was like just like the most generic actor. And not to talk trash about the guy, but he's just one of those guys that you just get to like, kind of talk, but he's just there because it's a name. And Javier did a thing where I'm like, oh man, like Stilgar is like a really important, cool character,
right? And
I thought that was really neat. I thought all the Fremen were really dope. The guy that Paul has to fight, I thought he was great. Of course, Zendaya, we all love Zendaya. She was great. It's just like I also, let's talk about the Harkonnens real quick.
Oh, yeah.
The Harkonnens. Like, man, like, when I heard Stellan Skarsgård was going to be Baron Harkonnen, I was like, I don't know. Because I always think of him as this, like, tall, like, and, like, I just think of him doing one kind of thing. And also, like, when I think of Baron Harkonnen, I think of a giant, fat, corpulent dude, because that's what he is, And, man, the makeup department brought it.
So good.
I don't know if I've ever seen such, like, realistic fat makeup. Like, I really felt like he was that heavy.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't feel like I was watching a guy in makeup.
No, not at all.
I was really impressed by that, and I thought he was phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Also, oh my God, what's his name? Polka Dot Man.
Yeah.
From Suicide Squad. Him playing the evil Mentat. He was great.
Yeah, everyone was cast really perfectly. They slid into their roles so well where like you said, everyone truly felt like the characters. There isn't a moment where you're like, Dave Bautista, you're Dave Bautista. Like, it's hard not to think of Dave Bautista as Dave Bautista, same with Jason Momoa, but at the same time, both of them really did a great job of embodying the roles that they were playing.
Yeah, no, he's great for Beast Raban. I mean, that's really what you need. You just need a guy who's, like, super, like, basically ferocious. And yeah, Batista was great in that role. Yeah, everyone was really good. And I really like one of the other things they did was with Thurfer. I remember at first with Thurfer, they might have done it with Peter too, like with the Mentats when they're doing equations, their eyes kind of going white or rolling back in their heads more likely. I thought that was cool because there's this whole thing in Dune where like, because they don't go into it, which is probably good because it's too much, but there's this thing in Dune where basically like computers aren't allowed, AI aren't allowed because there was this war thousands of years ago and they don't trust machines. And so there's these human computers named Mentats. So that's Thurfer Howat and Peter De Veers are both like essentially human computers that are helping out, the lords.
Yeah.
So that's what their place is. So they're humans, but there's stuff there's training and other stuff that's been done in their brains so that they can handle computations and stuff.
Yeah, I think honestly it was a smart thing for them not to bother going into that stuff.
It's too much.
They come off as advisors.
Yeah.
Like, very talented, smart advisors, and that's
all you
good
need,
enough.
Right?
Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah, I think the choice to leave out the Mentat stuff was probably a saving grace.
Yeah,
because once you get into the Mentats, and then you get into like the you get into Paul also learning that, you're like, what? You're like, I already get that he's like the Lord's son. I already get that he's learning like, you know, witchy lady ninja magic. Do I also need to learn about this, dude?
Yeah.
It's all too much.
I did love the, like, you know, all the scenes of him where he's just like, well, we're going to Arrakis, I'm going to learn about it.
Yeah.
You know, and just him also taking that on and understanding, you know, that how important that is, and all of the little moments of him, you know, being a diplomat, but sort of, you know, going against the way that people normally would do things. You know, it's like, you know, with in that meeting with Stilgar, it's like, you know, you guys take from us and give us nothing, and he's just like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
you know, and it's just it's a great moment of, like, you know, him truly understanding and having this great, you know, empathy for other people.
Yeah, well, it's perfect because the way that Paul was in Lynch's version was kind of close, but wasn't quite as I don't think as likable.
Yes.
You didn't want to follow him as much as this version. And the way he was in the Sci-Fi version, actually the Sci-Fi Channel version, was actually the worst version because they made him more like Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
He was like, gee golly, I don't understand anything that's going on. You're like, how?
Yeah.
How do you not understand anything that's going on? And I think the way they did it here was perfect, where like he still felt like he was the product of his training, but he was also a good guy. Mm-hmm. You know, he wasn't there just to, like, you know, to take the lands and take the resources. He was there to, like, basically be a good dude, and mostly it's because his dad and his mom are good people. Yeah.
None of the people in House Atreides come off as douchey in any way. They are all incredibly likable, and you know, as they really needed to be. You know?
And I think that furthered the story of the Empire being threatened by them. You know, in a way that I don't think they really were able to accomplish in the other ones. Mm-hmm. I never really quite understood, and even in the Lynch version I was like, I guess because the Harkonnens are bad, that's why they're attacking, but they were able, I think, to lay it out in a really strong way. But yeah, I mean, and by the way, I don't even know if this is spoilery or not. Is it?
I mean, it's such a tough thing because I don't think we're being spoilery.
No,
you know,
because we're talking about events in the movie, but I don't feel like they're like
we haven't given away any of the major plot points that if you're not familiar with the story, that would be like, why did you tell us that? So we're not going to.
No.
You know, here's the thing. When it all comes down to it, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I like you said, there was no part that felt boring to me. It is freaking beautiful.
Yeah.
I am really looking forward to the next one.
Me too.
You know, there's so much that we know from the books that's to come, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And it also made me want to reread the book. You know, this
for sure.
Like, it's not that it's missing anything that makes me want to, like, you know, call that out. No, it's just like it makes me remember how enjoyable reading the book was, and it makes me want to do it again.
Yeah, 100%. I also wanted to just say real quick, I thought all the Sardaukar stuff was really cool. I never got any sense of them in the book, really, other than being soldiers, and I thought, like, the kind of, like, throat soundy like communication they were doing was really dope. I thought just everything about the silence of them. Mm-hmm. I just thought, like, they made a lot of cool decisions that, like, contextualized them in a way I thought was neat. Probably the reason I think this is one of the best book adaptations I've ever seen is because they took what was there and they took all the stuff that worked. They let go of the stuff that was too inside baseball and confusing, and they added a few things that, like, only benefited it, but wasn't just like, you know what, all of a sudden we're like, maybe Paul can rap and that's why the people, like, you know, they did things to, like, to make everything make more sense, but they didn't just add stuff out of ego to add stuff. And I thought that was great.
Yeah. So in the end, I think the main thing that we're saying here is that we actually highly recommend the movie.
Yeah, and I have so much more to say, but we got to go, and I think you should see it. I think you should read the book, and let's make sure there's a number 2, because this movie should be celebrated. They did an amazing job.
Agreed. So, hopefully that'll happen soon, and we'll get to talk about it again. But for now, we'll be back with you next time. And, check out our YouTube channel and our socials at Geek World Radio, and go to geekworldradio.com.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.